The Cannabis Show is for information only. You should always consult with a qualified and licensed physician or other medical care provider.
Today on The Cannabis Show, Basil tells us about dried herb vaporizers, Kait teaches us about Dr. Verbora, and Hart discusses THC and driving in Heart to Heart. All that and more, stay tuned.
I notice a lot more commercials and PSAs these days dealing specifically with driving while under the influence of cannabis. I think it's great that there's ample education about impaired driving out there and the risks associated with it. But there's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. The current setup of Bill C-46 isn't playing fair when it comes to medical cannabis patients, and that has me downright shaking in my boots. Not only will there be a roadside saliva test for THC, but Canada will now be setting a level for THC in the blood within 2 hours of driving. And get this, police can lay an impaired driving charge based solely on the blood test results without needing to further prove impairment. And that's just downright unfair. The levels are based on nanograms per milliliter of blood, and if you're tested at a level of THC between 2 and 5 nanograms per mil, you could end up with a $1,000 debit on your bank account. But a THC level of more than 5 nanograms per mil could land you with some even harsher penalties, like a mandatory minimum fine of $1,000 on first offense, and up to 120 days in jail, plus fines if it's your third offense. Yikes! That pretty much means that a lot of us medical patients should probably sell our cars and not get behind the wheel again, because our levels are likely that high often on a 24-hour basis. I get that the rules are set up to protect us, but I feel that some of us may be more harmed than protected by them. Think about those patients who use those balance strains that need a little bit more THC. Generally speaking, most patients who use those balance strains don't report any impairment and feel comfortable operating a vehicle, and certainly after waiting several hours. Their blood levels may still be well above those limits. Look, I get that we have been doing this for a long time with blood alcohol levels, but the science linking THC levels in the blood to being impaired is a lot weaker. I definitely see a challenge in court coming up with this in the not so distant future. And remember, THC doesn't always mean impairment.
There are many ways to consume medical cannabis. The most efficient method, in my opinion, is to vaporize the dried cannabis in a machine referred to by many as a dry herb vaporizer. There are other vaporizers on the market that are intended to vaporize liquids and certain types of oils, hence the dry herb designation. Dry herb vaporizers generally create temperatures that range from about 93 to 260 degrees Celsius. However, most of us tend to vaporize our cannabis right around 204 degrees Celsius or so. At this temperature, there is no combustion taking place. We are actually boiling those trichomes in order to release the medicinal ingredients in the form of vapor, which we inhale. Vaporization is a preferred method because of the speed with which the body is able to absorb and process the medicinal ingredients. Chronic symptoms often require immediate relief. Another added benefit of this consumption method is the ease of dosing. Single inhales can be considered separate doses, thereby allowing a patient to keep a journal and dose accordingly. When dosing, the best practice is to start very low, a single inhale, and go slow, meaning dose, then give yourself a good 5 minutes to feel the effects, and if you require more, dose again. When vaporizing, effects are often felt within seconds of consuming, but waiting a full 5 minutes between doses allows the patient to fully gauge the effect of the dose. To prepare to use a vaporizer, in most cases, the medicine must be ground to a fine consistency. Some licensed producers provide product in this form. They've been termed blend, crumble, Grands Flow, and pre-ground. Turn the vaporizer on and start it heating up to your desired temperature. Lower temperatures generally allow for more flavor and less intense effects, while higher temperatures provide generally more intense effects at the expense of flavor. Load your ground cannabis into the heating chamber or the oven of the vaporizer. The cannabis will start to cook and the trichomes will boil, releasing cannabinoids. All you have to do is inhale them.
This is a new segment where I explore the backgrounds and lineage of some popular cannabis cultivars. This week, I take a look at a cultivar that seems to be flying under the radar these days, Barbara Bud. Barbara Bud is a Canadian strain and was created by the good folks at the House of the Great Gardener from Vancouver Island. According to its website, Barbara Bud is an indica plant and crosses an Afghani with another strain from Canada, Shishkaberry. We'll get to that cultivar in an upcoming segment of Hart Foundations. The results of this crossbreeding is a delicious Canadian strain of cannabis, which has a sweet candy-like aroma with citrus tones, all of which make for a beautiful flavor. She produces extremely frosty flowers that finish in about 7 weeks. The team at the House of the Great Gardener have won many awards for this strain all around the world, including the High Times Cannabis Cup, the Spanibus Cup, and other national and international competitions. Barbara Bud is known to provide its users medical relief from ailments such as spasms, stress, and chronic pain. In case you're wondering, the name Barbara Bud likely comes from the Canadian actress and radio personality of the same name.
Thanks to scientist Dr. Verbora for giving us a look into the uniqueness of the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is quite unique amongst bodily systems. It works in reverse or in retrograde. Consider this in the case of pain, for instance. Neurons send pain signals to the brain. If the pain is intense, the neuron fires more frequently, sending more pain signals to the brain. But if this neuron becomes busy with a cannabinoid, it will reduce the number of signals it sends to the brain. As the neuron becomes quieter, the brain interprets this as less pain, which in turn calms the nearby immune cells, which release less inflammatory substances in response to the pain signals. So inflammation may also be reduced.
The Cannabis Show. Hello, I'm Chris. We have Hart, Kait, and Basil. UFC was on last night, I think. Okay, so medicate. I mean, the retrograde and going back, and it's almost like taking a cell and emptying it and filling up with what was there before. Was I right on that?
Wow, the imagery there.
I thought I had an epiphany when you were doing that. It was cool.
Kind of. It's one of the few bodily systems that works in retrograde because most things will respond to stimuli, but this kind of the actual cannabinoid will block the receptors that the pain, the more intense the pain, the more pain messages go to the receptor, and yet the cannabinoid is kind of blocking it. So that's what they mean by retrograde, because then the pain signals can't reach it. And they talk a lot about inflammation cycles and how hard it is to get off inflammation cycles because it follows the pain. But because this can stop the pain, it can also stop that cycle of inflammation, which is really hard to do.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. No, that is so cool. No, and thank you for that. You really simplified that because I do get it. And and of course, vaping. It just always seems to be more and more important. You're talking about that in your segment.
We're always talking to new people, and it's always a question. So I think we should just talk about vaping as often as possible. I think more people should vape.
Yeah, and the technology is getting better.
That's absolutely it too.
Yeah, and it gets better because I'm still bulky thing in my pocket, but
right, yeah.
And then heart to heart, it's such a passionate subject, and this one is very touchy, but it has to be said, and it is driving with THC.
Yeah, what we just have to remember, we can't just paint it with one brush. Just because you test positive for THC or more than 5 nanograms, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily impaired. And I really think we need them to take a look at that because I think there's going to be a lot of people arrested that are medical cannabis patients that aren't impaired.
And if you are impaired, don't drive.
No, of course not.
But also, don't also judge it either. I saw in a Facebook comment once, and they're like, I did THC once, and I knew I couldn't drive. And I'm like, yeah, but there's other people out there who've done a lot more. But how do we fix this? How do we get this right?
Well, I think a big part is that we got to stop equating it to being drunk.
Yes.
And let's hopefully the people who are making these decisions are going to start to talk to more people who actually use cannabis, and they could start to get that point across. Being high is not being drunk. It's completely different. And people who use THC often and on a daily basis, it
doesn't really impair that much
really
anymore. When your tolerance goes up, and
it's a conversation we need to have that I think is not really
and tests have to be done.
Yet.
We could do it, right?
Yeah, we're gonna do it
Under police watch and under some safety track.
Yeah.
Us out on go-karts.
Controlled. I like it.
I like that idea too. Thanks for watching. Remember, new show every Wednesday. If you want to get in touch with us, this is the Cannabis Show at gmail.com.